Hello, everyone, and welcome. This short session focuses on Florida workers' compensation billing, specifically why clean, technically correct claims often still don't get paid on time. This is an educational session intended for Florida workers' compensation providers, specifically physical therapy, occupational therapy, pain management, and urgent care clinics. This is not legal advice. These are insights, practical insights based on Florida workers' compensation functioning. So, this is not legal advice. And this session specifically focuses on Florida workers' compensation billing. And this is not related to commercial insurance. And the topic for today is going to be why even technically clean claims face delays or non payment. So, without any further ado, let's move on with the session. If you are a Florida workers' compensation provider, you have probably experienced this. The claim, the CPT codes which are included in the claims are correct, and the NPI and the taxonomy code is valid. The documentation is completed, and the claim is accepted by the payer. But yet, there is no payment. There is no clear denial reason, just silence or delay. So the claim does not get paid or it gets delayed. So this is one of the frustration that the providers feel. We submitted everything correctly, but still we are not getting paid. Many clinics assume this means there is a billing error, but in Florida workers' comp, that's often not the real reason. So in order to understand that, we have to know what clean claim means in the Florida workers' compensation setting. Most clinics assume that non-payment is a billing error, but in Florida workers' compensation, that is often not true. Um, in commercial insurance, a clean claim often leads directly to payment, but in Florida workers' compensation, a clean claim simply means the claim is technically complete. It is not necessarily payable. Florida workers' compensation introduces some additional layers um, to make sure that the clean claim is also operationally correct. So, some of the layers are authorization alignment, medical necessity interpretation, adjusted discretion, and career or TPA workflows. So, while a claim can be clean on paper, it can still fail operationally. So, in Florida workers' compensation, um, the carrier or the TPA evaluates the claim operationally, not just technically. So, one of the reasons, or one of the most common reasons, clean claim don't get paid in Florida workers' compensation is authorization mismatch, and this is the number one silent payment killer. So, what happens is that this services are rendered within the dates, but uh, there could be some issues with the frequency. The frequency could have been exceeded. There could be some wrong diagnosis or the diagnosis which are not authorized by the provider, sorry, the payer. There could be some mismatch between the diagnosis and the authorized treatment, and the treatment could be rendered based on verbal approval rather than the written authorization. Another common reason, that too specifically in Florida, is the confusion between the adjuster and the nurse case manager. And clinics are often relying on employer confirmation, the two on verbal confirmation, not written confirmation. So, these are some of the common issues that we see in Florida workers' compensation. So, from a billing standpoint, Florida workers' compensation carrier typically pay strictly based on what's formally authorized and not what was discussed verbally. So, it is important that we always match the CPT, the diagnosis codes, and the frequency um, to what is been authorized. And this should not be based on verbal authorization, but this should be based on written authorization from the provider. So, reason number two is the medical necessity. So, in Florida workers' compensation setting, necessity is interpreted differently. So, let me explain. Medical necessity in Florida workers' compensation is not the same as in commercial insurance. So, Florida workers' compensation places heavy emphasis on work relatedness, functional improvement, and the return to work relevance. So, even appropriate clinical care can be questioned if the documentation does not clearly tie the treatment to functional and work related outcomes. Um, this is where clinics often feel the payment decisions are unfair. But from the TPAs or the career standpoint, uh, they are applying the workers' compensation rules or the standards. So, some examples I can say from what I have seen, there could be some excessive visits post maximum medical improvement, and these are not medically necessary from the TPA standpoint. And the notes or the medical records, they have weak or the progress notes are weak. They are not legit. And sometimes there is copy paste documentation that are sent from the clinics. And what TPA sees is that it is not medically necessary. So they are not going to pay for that service that is being rendered. The reason number three for delay in payment is the carrier or the TPA behavior. So let me explain. In Florida workers' compensation, follow up strategy matters as much as claim submission. And Florida providers often underestimate who is reviewing the claim. So, different Florida workers' compensation carriers and TPA have their own internal review behaviors, and their follow up threshold are different, and the payment cycle varies from payer to payer. So, some claims they don't move forward until there is some proactive follow up. And even when there is nothing technically missing, there should be some strategic or tactical follow up that needs to be done. So, in Florida workers' compensation, follow up strategy is often just as important as clean claim submission. So, most unpaid Florida workers' compensation claims aren't rejected because they are wrong. They are technically correct, but they are unpaid because they don't align with how Florida workers' compensation actually works. So there are some few practical steps that clinics can take so that they can improve the outcome and increase the revenue flow of their clinics. So the one thing that they can do is first verify the authorization, not just the intake, but throughout the episode of care. Second, the documentation alignment or align the documentation clearly to work related and functional improvement. And third, there should be tracking of unpaid claims by the carrier, not just by aging days, but by the TPS behavior. And there should be some tactical or strategic follow up that needs to be done. These steps alone can significantly reduce the unexplained delays. So, In conclusion, most Florida workers' compensation claims are not rejected because they are wrong, because they are rejected or they are not paid or delayed because they don't align with the Florida workers' compensation workflows. So this session is part of an ongoing effort to educate Florida workers' compensation providers. So thank you for your time and thank you.